Hey guys, welcome to another Python tutorial for beginners. So in today's video, we'll continue to go through more examples about the loops in Python, especially focusing on using loops in various different data structures. So let's get into this. So in our previous videos, we've talked about different types of Python's data structure, including list, dictionary, tuple, set, string, and many more. And so in today's video, I want to go through a few examples about data structure conversion using loops. So oftentimes, there are many situations where you have to convert the data in one data type to another. So the first example that we're going to talk about is to convert the list of tuples into list of a dictionary and vice versa. So I have an input list here, which is a list of tuples, and I have the name as the first element and actual name as the second element. And I also have an output list, which is a list of dictionaries, and I have the name as the key and actual name as the value. So the first thing that we're gonna do is to create a result list so that we can actually store all the elements as the output list. So result list, and then in below here, we're gonna create a for loop that iterates through the input list. So for tuple element in input list, and then below here I'm gonna create a dictionary because we want to convert the tuple to dictionary. So I can say result dict equal to curly braces, and I'm gonna set the key as the first element in the tuple element. So I can do tuple element and use the indexing. So first element colon tuple element square bracket second element here. So I'm setting the first element as a key and second element as a value in the dictionary. And then all we have to do at this point is to add the result dict into the result list. So result list dot append result dict, and then at the very bottom I can just print the result list so that we can actually see the result. So if I run this, then you will see a list of dictionaries. So the input list was actually converted to the output list with a name as a key and actual name as a value, as you see in the output list. So it was pretty simple, right? So now we're gonna try to convert the output list into the input list. So in below here, I'm gonna do the same thing, create a result list so that we can store all the elements into the output list. And then we're gonna have a for loop here for dict element in output list colon below here create a tuple, so result tuple parenthesis, and I'm gonna set the name as the first element, and then I'm gonna do a dict element dot get name. So what I'm doing here is that I'm setting the name as the first element because if we look at the output list, all the dictionaries have a key of name. So that's why I'm setting the name hard-coded as the first element in the tuple, and I'm using the name as a key to actually get the value from the dict element. So I'm doing the dict element dot get and specify the name as a key. And in below here, I'm gonna actually append result list dot append the result tuple. And at the very end, I can just print result list. And then if I run this one more time, then you will be able to see the list of tuples coming out from the list of dictionaries that we have. So we now successfully converted the output list into the input list. But there's one thing that I want to highlight here. So as you see below here, when we converted the list of dictionaries into the list of tuples, we hardcoded the name as the first element for the tuple because all the dictionaries had a key of name. But what happens if you have multiple different keys in the dictionaries? So for example, instead of name, you have an email, telephone, fax, then this method will not work because now we have to actually look through one more time to actually get the different key and then the values associated with the key so that we can properly set the first and second element for the tuples. So then let's actually try that method so that we don't really have to hardcode the name here. So let me first comment this, and below the for loop, I'm going to create another for loop to actually iterate through the dict element. So I can do for key value in dict element dot items colon, and in here I'm gonna create a result tuple and create a parenthesis and pass the key as the first element and value as the second element. So by doing it this way, we don't really have to hardcode the key, which is the name, as the first element, because regardless of which key that you have within the dict element, it's automatically gonna parse out the key and value, and then it's gonna create a result tuple, and that result tuple will be added to the result list here. Result tuple And at the very bottom, we can just print the result list here. So if I run this one more time, then you will be able to see exactly the same result here. But this time, the only difference here is that we have a nested for loop that iterates through the dict element within the output list. And because we have a secondary for loop here, we automatically parse the key and value within the dictionary so that we don't really have to worry about hard coding the first element name like this, but instead, regardless of which key and value that you have within the dictionary, the secondary for loop will just automatically parse it and then assign the key as the first element and value as the second element into the result tuple that we have here. Okay, so now let's try to work with a slightly more advanced data structures. So as you see in the screen, I have a list called programmers that contains the dictionaries with each of the programmers' information. And within the dictionary, I have a name and programmer ID, which is unique for each of the programmer. And I also have a programming languages and frameworks in a list format so that we can actually hold multiple values here. So in this section, we will try to achieve three things here. So first, we will try to add a new key called operating system into each of the dictionary that we have in the programmer's list. And second, we will try to merge all three lists that we have in the dictionary. So we have a programming languages, frameworks, and then we're gonna add the operating system as a list. So we're gonna try to merge all three lists into one list called technical stacks. And finally, we will try to destructure all the information that we have here to come up with a one paragraph that serves as an introduction for each of the programmer that we have in the programmer's list. So the first thing that we're gonna do here is to add another key called operating system into this programmer's dictionary so that we have information about which operating system each programmer like to do their programming on. So let me first copy the first paragraph here to down below. And so if we think about this, each programmer may have their own preference of which operating system they like to work on, right? So let me create a dictionary here. So I can say OS mapper and create a dictionary and set the key as programmer ID because programmer ID is unique. And then set the value as the operating system that each of the programmer like to work on. So I can say Windows and Mac. And for the second programmer with a programmer ID of 2, like to work on Unix and Mac. And then the last programmer, ID of 3, and then have a list of Linux and Windows. So then now we have our OS mapper that specifies the programmer ID with a list of OS that each programmer likes to work on. Let's try to loop through this programmer's list so that we can actually add an operating system into each of the dictionary that we have here. So I'm gonna say for programmer dict in programmers, which is a list. And then in here, the first thing that we're gonna do is to get the ID from the programmer dict so that we can actually use the ID as a key to retrieve the values in the OS mapper. So I can set programmer ID equal to programmer dict.get, and let's specify the key as the programmer ID, right? So if we look at the dictionary, we have a key as the programmer ID here. So now we have the programmer ID. Let's try to get the programmer operating system. So we can do programmer OS equal to, and we're gonna use the OS mapper. And within this dictionary, we're gonna use the key as the programmer ID to retrieve the value, which is the list here. So OS mapper.get, and let's specify the key as the programmer ID. So first we got the programmer ID from this dictionary here. And then we're going to use that ID to actually get the value for the OS mapper. And so now we have the list values available. Now what we have to do is to actually update the dictionary that we have within the programmer's list, meaning each of the dictionary that we have here. So what we're going to do there is that we're going to try to do programmer dict.update. So the update method actually allows you to either update or set the new key and value pair within the existing dictionary. And in here, I'm going to specify the curly braces and then specify the key as operating system colon and set the value as programmer OS that we have set. So let's walk through what we are doing here once again. So the first step is that we are looping through the programmer's list to parse out each of the programmer dict that we have. And then we are getting the programmer ID from the programmer dict, and then we are specifying the key as the programmer ID as specified here. And then once we get the programmer ID, we are actually getting the programmer OS, meaning we are trying to get this list value here for each of the programmer. So we are calling the OS mapper because OS mapper is the one that actually contains this value, not the dictionary that we have above. So OS mapper.get, and we are specifying the programmer ID as a key. So the programmer ID should be integers like 1, 2, and 3. So based on which integers is being passed on, we are specifying the key here so that we can actually get the correct value, which is the list for each iteration, meaning for each programmer that we have. And then once we do that, then we are setting the new key and value pair for the programmer dict that we have within this for loop by using the update method and specifying the key as the operating system and value as the programmer OS that we retrieve from the OS mapper dictionary. And finally, we can just print the programmer dict so that we can actually check whether it's working. So if I run this, then you will be able to see the operating system added with a key and value pair for all the programmers that we have here. Okay, so now we are done with our first task. Let's move on to our second task. But before that, let me write a comment here. So number 1 was to add operating system with values for each programmer. And now we're going to move on to the second task, number 2 here. And then the second task is to merge all 3 lists into one and delete unused list. So in order for us to actually do this, we need to actually create a new attribute, right? Because within this dictionary, what we are trying to do here is that we are trying to merge this programming languages, frameworks, as well as the operating system that we just added into one new attribute called technical stacks, and then try to remove the programming languages, frameworks, and operating system altogether. So at the bottom, let's create a new variable here. So I'm going to call that as a technical stacks. So technical stacks, and set it equal to, I want to actually get the values for the programming languages, frameworks, as well as the OS. So what we can do here is that programmer dict.get, and then let's specify the key for the first one, which is the programming languages, right? And then plus. So if you use the plus operator on the list object, what it's going to do is that it's going to try to merge all the lists together into one list. So that's why I'm using the plus here without actually creating another for loop here. And then I can also add programmer dict.get frameworks. And then the last one that I'm going to add is the programmer OS, because we just specify the programmer OS right here, which actually contains the list coming from the OS mapper. So there is no need for us to actually access the new list that we just added in the programmer dict. So let me also apply some line breaks here if possible. Okay, awesome. So now we have a technical stacks variable that contains a one list that contains all the values in all 3 different lists here. So then what we have to do at this point is to add a new key and value pair and use this as a value and key as the technical stacks. So we can do programmer dict, and then let's use a different method to actually add a key and value pair. So using the update method is one of the way, but let's also use the square bracket method, and then we can specify the key here, technical stacks, and then set that equal to technical stacks variable. So once we actually do this, let's check whether the programmer dict was added. So I can just do print programmer dict, and let me also remove the above print statement here because we don't need it. So if I run this one more time and scroll to the right, then you will see a new key and value pair, key as a technical stacks and value as all the elements merged together into one list for the programming languages, frameworks, as well as the operating system for all the programmers that we have here. Okay, so now we just added the technical stacks. Let's try to delete the programming languages, operating system, and frameworks. So right before the print statement, we can use the there keyword and specify the dictionary. So programmer dict, and then square bracket, and specify the key of the element that you want to delete. So I want to delete the frameworks, and then I also want to delete the programming languages, and then I also want to delete the operating system because now everything is included in the technical stacks. So if I run this one more time, then you will be able to see only the technical stacks, not the frameworks, programming languages, and operating systems. Okay, so now we are done with our second task. Let's move on to our last task here. So I can say 3, create a paragraph for programmer's introduction. So for this, I'm going to create a new variable called introduction. So introduction, and set it equal to a string formatting. And I'm going to create a template here. So hello, my name is curly braces, and then my technical stacks include following, and then another curly braces. And let me also apply the line break here, and then dot format. And in here we can just say programmer dict.get name, because each of the programmer dict that we have here contains the key and value and key as a name here, so that we can actually use that inside the for loop. And let me also apply another line break here, and comma. For the technical stacks, we can just do programmer dict.get technical stacks, and we are pretty much done here. So we can just do print introduction, and then if I just print this one more time, then you will be able to see all the introductions coming out. But let me just delete this print statement so that we can only see the introduction for now. So if I run this one more time, then you will see 3 sentences for 3 of the programmers. So hello, my name is Danny. So this was replaced, and as well as my technical stacks include all the technical stacks that we see here in a list format. But as you see, the technical stacks are being displayed in a list format because technical stacks is a list data type. So if you want to display this in a more prettier format, meaning without the square bracket, we have a couple of options that we can actually do. The first option is the easiest option, where we can just actually use the string method called join to actually join all the elements in this technical stacks list with a comma separated format. So for that, what we can do is that we can just specify a string here. So 2 quotation marks here, dot join, and then wrap the technical stacks with a parenthesis like this. And within this join, we can actually specify the delimiter. So I'm going to specify comma and a space. So if I run this one more time, then you will now see the technical stacks being displayed in a prettier format where you don't see a square bracket, and every element is separated by the comma and a space. So this join is a string method that we have learned in the string video, where we first have to create a string data type, meaning the 2 empty quotations like this. And then in this string data type, we are actually calling the string method called join, and we are passing this technical stacks as the argument in the join method, so that the join method can actually parse out all the elements in this list in a comma separated format like this. And there is also another manual way of doing this by looping through the technical stacks list so that it can actually generate the same result here. So let's actually try that here. So let me first copy this and then put it above here so that we can actually reference it in the future. Okay, and then one more parenthesis. And let me just delete this. And below the introduction, what we can do here is that we first have to create a new string to actually display in this format, right? So what we're gonna do is that I'm gonna create a new variable called new string, and then set that equal to an empty string. And then I'm gonna have another for loop within this for loop so that I can actually loop through this technical stacks list. So I can do a for technical stack in programmer dict.get technical stacks colon, and in here what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna actually add each of the element, meaning the technical stack, into the new string with a comma separated format. So I can do new string plus equal technical stack, and in below I also want to apply the comma, right? So I can do new string plus equal, and then a quotation with a comma and a space. So if I just copy this new string in the slot where the technical stack is currently in, and let's see what happens. So if I run this one more time and scroll to the right, you see a similar format here with each element separated by the comma and a space. But the problem here is that you see a trailing comma here, and this is not what we want, right? And this trailing comma is happening because we are actually adding this comma into the new string after the technical stack, meaning each of the element is being added into the new string. So in order for us to actually not display this trailing comma and a space here, what we need to do is that we need to actually cut this only the last two characters out from this new string. So what we can do here is that in the new string place that we have, we can just use the string slicing. So square bracket and then do a colon -2. So what I'm doing here is that I'm not specifying the start index, meaning I want to actually print out everything in the string, but I'm specifying the stop index as a -2, meaning I want to retrieve everything except the last two characters. So if I print this one more time and scroll to the right, then now you will be able to see the complete element printed out in a pretty format without the square bracket, and you will not see a trailing comma and a space here. Okay guys, that's it for this video. So in today's video, we tried to work with various different Python data type using loops. In our next video, we will create a unit conversion program that allows us to convert one unit to another unit using everything that we have learned so far. So please stay tuned. And if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe and like my videos. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you in next videos.